But what we need to do is bring the people together. And this is why I think the cause of liberty is so important, because we can bring people together. In Washington, even today, you will hear, and we will be challenged in the campaign, well, it sounds like you're not a compromiser. What, don't you think you have to compromise? I said, no, you don't have to compromise. But what you should do is understand how to bring groups of people together because you endorse the same ideas. Because it is our campaign that has a tremendous outreach programs to people who are called independents, who don't belong to political parties, young people who are just looking at the political system, as well as many Democrats. Who knows, there may even be a couple Democrats here today. So, so no, I really do believe that the message of liberty can bring people together, and that it is the cause of liberty that does this. So this is what we need to do, rather than saying, well, okay, in the past, when we were a wealthy nation, we had a lot of largesse. And one of the disadvantages of a free society is, ironically, that there's so much wealth that people forget about emphasizing where wealth comes from. So then they gravitate to sending more lobbyists to Washington rather than working more on R&D and producing products. No, they rush to Washington until the treasury is bare, and that is what's happened today. So out of necessity, we are now being forced to think once again about production and where does wealth come from. Because right now we're broke, and the treasury is bare, and the money, although it's still functioning, will no longer function once people lose confidence on this. So there is something major going on, and this is very, very significant. The important thing is the country is changing, and for the most part, I think much better. So I see the people like you who are rallying and saying, enough is enough. It's time we put our foot down and said, no more of this big government ruling our lives and policing the world and fighting wars that are undeclared, and the printing press is running. It's time to change all that. Revolution. It's a revolution in ideas, an intellectual revolution, and that was what preceded almost 100 years before our first revolution. So the groundwork has been laid. The intellectuals have studied economics and Austrian economics and sound money and the principles of liberty. We have a better understanding of monetary policy and economics than we did in the 19th century. So when they say we want to go backwards, it annoys me to no end, because if we go back and pick up the pieces, really freedom is a new idea, a couple hundred years where it's been actually tried. It is those who want more government and who will use bigger government if we have a deterioration of our economy as well as our political system. But they want to go back to more government. That's tyranny. Tyranny has been around for as long as history's been written. So we want to advance the cause of liberty and explain how free people act and take care of themselves, and how you can live in peace under those conditions, much more so than with authoritarianism. But there's no doubt the revolution is alive and well. It reminds me, of what happened in the 1960s. I was drafted in 1962, and I was in the Air Force for 5 years. But I do remember the turmoil that occurred in the 1960s, and there were some rough and tumble times there. And there was a saying that went that if you weren't a liberal, a bleeding heart liberal when you were 20, that you had no heart. But if you weren't a conservative by the time you were 40, you didn't have a brain. But I don't know, why can't we have a heart and a brain at the same time? Because those people who are moved by humanitarian instincts of using force to make you better people and to redistribute wealth, The humanitarian, though, the one who really understands that if you care about your fellow man, I don't meet many people who say, I don't care a hoot about my fellow man. Most people do. But if you really do, you have to argue the case for freedom. You have to argue the case for sound money and limited government. This is what will help the maximum number of people. And I think that those ideas are alive and well, growing by leaps and bounds, and it is the alternative to endless growth of government and growth of spending, and we will not get out of this mess by spending more money and running up more debt. That will not work. A lot of people wonder, how well we're doing and how we will know about victory, because sometimes we don't win the daily battles. Sometimes elections don't go exactly as we want. But in by the early 1970s, when that disaster, the Vietnam War, finally ended, two colonels got together, one American colonel, Harry Summers, and Colonel Two, who was Vietnamese, and they got together to talk over how they were going to pick up the pieces and how we were going to get out of their country finally. So they were talking about it, and our colonel, still wanted to get the last word in. He says, listen, Colonel, he says, I want you to know, that you guys never beat us on the battlefield, not one time. And Colonel Two looked at the American colonel, he says, yes, but it was also irrelevant. And that is the way it's going to be. We may have our ups and downs. We may have victories here and there. We may lose a few. But eventually, we're going to win. And if you lose one battle, it's going to be irrelevant, because the cause of liberty will be victors at the ultimate test if we continue to do what we're doing now and to increase this revolution and spread this revolution throughout the land. A true revolution has to have high goals. We have to strive for what seems to be impossible, because at times it just seems so overwhelming, and you don't spend as much time in Washington as I do. So if you think it's overwhelming, you ought to go to Washington for a while. A lot of friends will come up to me and they say, how have you done this for all these years? Don't you get tired of it? Haven't you become, so disgusted with it all and discouraged? And I said, no, not really. I said, it never bothered me that much, because I always protected myself by not having overly high expectations. And the victories have been always more than I had expected. But we do have to have high goals, and I am more energized now than I've been. I started really speaking out publicly when I was absolutely certain that I would never win an election, because I thought I was, asking for too much freedom, that sort of thing. But I started in 1974, and but things are changing rapidly now, and the growth, the foundation, the intellectual groundwork has been laid, and the numbers are coming out, and it is an idea whose time has come. There is no doubt about it. And an idea of that nature cannot be stopped by politicians, governments, guns, or anything else. These ideas are very powerful. In the old days, they had to be spread by word of mouth. And if we can contain the government's attempt to overtake the internet, believe me, the internet will spread these messages, I'll tell you. But in order to do this, you do have to have passion. There is no doubt about it. You have to really feel strongly about it and get involved. Educating oneself is very important to know, to understand why non-intervention foreign policy is a good policy, not a bad policy. We're not un-American, and we're not against the troops because we don't endorse illegal wars. I mean, that is nonsense. And one, I think, very good point for our campaign, when they try to say, well, he doesn't support the troops, he doesn't support these wars. Yeah, but wonder why the troops support this campaign. That's what I want to know. But the passion for liberty has to be combined with reason and good policies. Ideas do have consequences. Bad ideas have bad consequences. Good ideas have good consequences. And this is where we're making great progress. This is where I feel good about what's happening. And the campuses are alive, and it's not so much, it's only a younger generation, but in many ways the younger generation has helped energize another generation, those who have felt like there's not much hope for what is happening. But true revolutions, if you look at it outside our country, and when you look at them on TV and other countries where they're trying to overthrow tyranny, so often it's on the campuses. The young people have gotten up and have been willing to stand on principle. So this is a truly alive and well. And if you do, we will exceed expectations. I, quite frankly, believe that not much would come of my attempt to speak out and get a few things off my chest. But I've always been surprised that the reaction and the responses have been so favorable. So that is what will happen once you get more involved, and as you do it, the expectations will, the success will far exceed the expectations. So the main thing is to be positive about it. The other thing that I like to suggest is that it's long and hard and tedious, and sometimes it wears one out. But there are a lot of volunteers that have been involved in the campaign, working hard, phone calling and knocking on doors and all these things that they do. But it is rewarding, and it has to be done. But people should have fun doing it. There's very important thing, because you do meet other people that are like-minded. They might have different ideas about how to spend their money and how to run their personal lives, but all of a sudden they're your friend because you're fighting for the same thing, and that is the liberty and the freedom of the individual.